The Wisconsin Paper Council is the premier trade association which advocates for Wisconsin's paper, pulp, and forestry industries before state and federal elected officials and regulators. The WPC also works to educate the general public and the media about the importance of pulp, paper, and forestry production in Wisconsin and throughout the Midwest.
And joining us today is Nels Hughes, Marketing Specialist for Menominee Tribal Enterprises. Thank you for joining us today. So for those listening who may not be familiar with Menominee Tribal Enterprises, could you go into a bit about the history and what you produce in Wisconsin?
Sure. We're one of the largest sawmills in the Midwest, and we're on the Menominee Indian Reservation, which was formed in 1854. And we started cutting timber in 1908, so we've been around for a long time. We were actually doing logging right from the start, so we have different documents that we can show that were handwritten by the loggers back in the 1850s on what they were going to cut, how much they were going to cut. They were managing the forest even back then 150 years ago. So it's a pretty cool thing. So we're kind of the business arm of the tribe. We manage the forest. We have our own foresters that are managing the forest and watching it every day. We're going to decide where we're going to take material from every day and what species of trees they would be. And if we have something unusual like a tornado or a blowdown or whatever, we need to get it out of the woods fast so it doesn't rot and still has value. So we get those things every once in a while. And part of the reason we get them is because the forest is so big. A lot of the windstorms kind of stop when they hit us. So they're not running across the farmland anymore. They're hitting a huge block of trees, and sometimes we get blowdowns. So it's a really unusual place. It's home to the Menominee tribe. Where they settled there. Chief Oshkosh picked that land, and they settled there, and they've been there for quite some time now. And it's turned out to be quite the forest. Fantastic waterways. The Wolf River and the Red River are huge water systems that are very clean and are really important to people of Wisconsin. So a lot of fish run up those streams and spawn every spring, and we just make sure that those are being protected as well. Besides our forest, we're watching our watershed as well. So that's a little bit about us.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned, when the winds hit, it blocks because of the forest. And I read on your website that when you're looking from a satellite view, you can see the perimeters of the Menominee forest. And I was like, that can't be true. That's crazy. And then I went on Google Maps and I looked at the satellite view, and there's a perfect outline of the Menominee forest. So that's very impressive. So I have to ask, how do you keep up such a lush forest, but still maintaining a business?
Well, when you come from the west, actually, it's the most dramatic because we're coming right directly out of farmland, and you're hitting a wall of trees that are 100 to 200 feet tall, like immediately. It's really dramatic. If you ever get a chance to see it, it's really something. And yes, you can see us on Google Maps from this outer space. And yes, it is an outline. And keep in mind that 2/3 of that outline are in the Chequamegon National Forest. So that's a national forest surrounding us and on some of those sides, and it's still that dramatic. So it's kind of neat. So we've been trying to do this and sustainable forestry from the very start. Chief Oshkosh said we're gonna cut the trees, the sick and the dying, and the ones that are of age. We're gonna move from the east to the west, and when we get to the west, we're gonna go back and we're gonna start all over. So we've cut our forests at least twice already, some cases 4 times. So it's we're kind of watching for it all the time. When the trees are like any tree, when they get pruned or when others move out, others get to shoot up in their spot. And so we can really maintain a high level of wood fiber that's coming out of there that the paper companies and others really like, and it makes a big difference in the sale of the timber. And then we make sure that we mark everything down. So all that's kind of taken out of like counties of the state. That whole forest is like counties of the state divided up. We call them quadrants. And each of those quadrants, our foresters will go in there every 15 years. We make sure we do it. And they're going to look at what that forest has to offer every 15 years. Is it ready? Is it past due? and we decide when we're going to cut it, and we take it individually. We're not clear cutting stuff. We don't do that. We don't do like you see on the West Coast. In some cases, they got to do that. But where we are selectively cutting everything, which makes it very sustainable. We actually have twice as much timber now as we had in 1854. And the forest is so healthy, like you say, it's so healthy, and we're real proud of this. It's outproducing what we can take from it by a lot. So that's pretty exciting.
That is very exciting, and I can see why you would submit to our sustainability report. But for those who may not be unfamiliar, the Wisconsin Paper Council released a sustainability report last year, and that was our effort to connect with legislators and the public to show the sustainability achievements of the paper industry and the supply chain. But Menominee Tribal Enterprises article was unique in a way that it wasn't just about the sustainability in the forest, but it was, about the sustainability of building connections with people. So could you tell me a bit more about the Peace Tree Project?
Yeah, well, part of what we do is we want to reach back out into the community. So part of our whole base is the forest and what's surrounded as the tribe, our whole organization, our ecosystem, and their schools and our kids. And so we reach out to our kids, and they're doing unusual things that kids around the state would never get a chance to do. But we also want to reach out to the state and be able to do other things. So the Peace Tree Project actually came from something that's 400-year-old tradition. And so the Peace Tree was a group of young men. They weren't very old at the time when the women said to them, if you guys keep fighting all the time, we won't have any men left to propagate and have kids. It's not possible. You're killing them all off at a very young age. And they were concerned about it. And so these young men said, well, let's see what we can do to make peace. What can we do to do that? And they made a pact. And part of what they put together was used in the Constitution later on, if you can believe that. And they put this whole thing together on how these five tribes of the Iroquois Nation, the Confederacy, and said, we're not going to do this anymore. And one of the tribes locally for us was the Oneida. They were a part of that group, and Mohegans were a part of that group, and the Seneca Nation were a part of that group. So those are all tribes that we talk about and have ties to Wisconsin, because some of them ended up here. And so that was a really great story, and they went and they made this plan, and everybody liked it, and everybody wanted to be a part of it. And so they kept going to all these different nations and teaching about it and how this is going to work. But here's how you got to do it. You got to take this white pine tree. It's got to be a white pine tree because a white pine tree has 5 needles in its cluster, the same as the 5 original tribes of the Iroquois Confederacy. We're going to take that white pine tree, and we're going to dig a hole, and we're going to take all the mooring stuff that we have, and we're going to throw it in the hole. We're going to plant that tree on top of all that stuff so we can't get at it anymore. This is going to be our pact. That white pine tree is going to cover it all up. And over time, it's going to break it all down, and it's going to end up back into the earth. That's what we're going to do. And that's our commitment to each other, that we're never going to do it again. We're never going to war against each other again. We don't need to do that. And they didn't. And they still haven't today. So it's a great thing to be able to do. And the idea actually was brought to me. I was talking and teaching some kids at Milwaukee School of Engineering. And I said, hey, guys, we're right in the middle of a pandemic here. We've got chaos going on everywhere. We've got getting killed. People are getting killed. And what can we do to make this better? Is there something that in Indian legend that we could go back and look at and that you'd want to talk about? The Peace Tree is what those young students came up with. And let's grow from that. And that's what we did. We grew from that. So that whole Peace Tree thing grew into, we're going to go to places in the Midwest that really want it, and we're going to teach about it, and we're going to do it. So Chicago, Illinois, at the Field Museum is one of the sites. Kenosha in Wisconsin, which was a terrible place during the riots and all that stuff. We planted a tree right down there by where they had the riots. And people from government actually went there and prayed by that peace tree. So that was a pretty cool thing. Appleton was another one. We did that on Indigenous Day in Appleton, and talked about women and stuff that were being murdered, and they don't know where they are anymore. And we kind of threw that whole thing out there, and the governor came to join us, and the lieutenant governor, and gave a nice speech and really rallied the troops, so to speak. The place was packed. It was really a neat thing to be involved in. And so those are our biggies that we did. Then we went to 5 schools around the state. The Wisconsin Rural School Alliance said, we're going to pick schools that are kind of like above and beyond. And so the schools kind of competed for it, which was a really neat deal. And so we went out in each region. So we had Southern Door High School up in near Door County. We had Lawrence High School, northeast part of the state. We had Northwestern up in the northwest part of the state. Actually, 2 schools there, Iron River and the main campus. They wanted us to go to Iron River because the guy said to me, he says, I know it's not on your thing, but they're right on the way, and nobody ever comes there. Nobody ever goes there. Could you go there? And we went there. It was kind of interesting for me when we went there. My wife, Ellen, who's sitting over here on the side, Ellen and I went to a little school just like that. When we walked in, we were like, this is like our original school where we went. So it was really cool. And that was over 50 years ago. So then we ended up in DeSoto, right along the Mississippi River in a southern part of the state. And they were all so excited. We all planted the peace tree. We put, as a symbol of what the Iroquois Confederacy did, we did it with arrowheads. We had some arrowheads that were man-made arrowheads, and we handed it out to all the kids. And the kids came around, and they put their arrowhead in the roots of the peace tree. And then we covered it up with the soil that was left and put it over the top of the tree as kind of the blessing. And when you bless something like that, you need to let it sit and let it age a little bit. So they did that blessing, and we all walked away in silence and didn't look back. It was a really cool thing. Just a little while ago, the Wisconsin Rural School Alliance had the national convention in Green Bay in October. And during that convention, 2 of the schools that were participating with us said, we use that as a discipline thing with kids all the time. Well, you guys know what to do. The peace tree is right out there. You go out there and you settle your differences. I'll stand on the side and just watch you take care of it. And Carl Morin, he told me, who's from Florence, he said, I'm amazed at how well it works and how they look back at what they studied about and what they learned. And for them, it's real. And they're going to make a change. So the peace tree was supposed to mean this is a new unity for our nation. This is a new unity, and it's exactly what they did when they started 400 years ago. We did the same thing during the pandemic, and everybody got to be a part of that too. We also had a big event in Milwaukee too, and MSOE put that on, and that was fantastic as well. So I can't say enough about the students that I got to work with and be a part of all the festivities around the state and the new friends that we've made. And we are able to tell our story again, tell the Peace Tree story, which was from the original Iroquois Nation. It's actually their story, but we get to kind of tell it that, hey, we were a part of it too. And so really engage kids from around the state. That was the whole deal. And that's what we as a tribe want to do. We want to give back something. So we want people, when we tell them about our forests, we want to tell them, hey, this has been for a long time, and this is how we do it, and this is why we do it. And when you talk about climate change and all the stuff that young people especially are very interested in, we have a pretty good idea of how it works on a forestry aspect because we've been doing it for so long. So it's just been a great blessing.
Yes, that's a really great story, and I put the lessons from a mature peace tree, which is at the beginning of the sustainability report. We read it, and it felt like the motif of the sustainability report. Like everybody needs to work together on this, especially with sustainability issues, and so thank you for providing that to us. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Field Museum because I thought that was just incredibly impressive that you were able to contribute to that. And I believe I read that wood from a 191-year-old tree.
191-year-old, yeah.
Yeah, it was contributed. Could you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, we needed a tree for the Field Museum for a lot of the projects and the seating and stuff that they were going to do. And we wanted something really special. And we wanted to be able to do what they call a cookie cut on the tree, which is like, what does it look like? And we count all the years and when did this all start? Well, it had to be at least from 1854, we got to be back at least that far, and we were able to get back further than that. So what it was a tree that was easily available, that was a large tree, and a lot of those large trees, we leave them. We don't necessarily cut them down because we want them for seed for the next crop. We plant trees on our reservation, but majority is done by the forest itself. And so we want those big ones for that. Well, this tree had some damage on it and got hit by lightning. And my head forester, Ron Mako, called me up. He says, I got your tree. It's 181 years old or something like that. But what do you think? I said, let's take it. Film it. So we filmed it, and we had people that, we had loggers that kind of competed to be the one taking the tree down, which was pretty awesome. It was a huge tree. I think it was 4.5 feet in diameter. And we were able to cut it down. That tree, when you cut it down, if you actually would saw it into lumber, was enough lumber in that tree to build two average homes.
Wow.
That's a big tree. But we wanted to do at the Field Museum. We cut 3-inch thick slabs for seating at the Field Museum. So they're actually sitting on the tree. They're a part of it. That's like underneath them. That tree sits on top of white hard maple that's on the floor. And white hard maple is what all the basketball courts around the world are built on. And white hard maple, it just doesn't dent. It just weathers really well. And so we have that sitting on that. And then we have some cookies cut so they can count the rings on the tree and use it for other different parts of the display. And then what we had left over, we sent to the Mitchell Museum also in Evanston, Illinois, up by Northwestern University. And they want to use it at their Native American museum there. And we're going to build some more seating for it because white pine weathers well, even for outdoors. And we've used it for a lot of different projects like that. That was our donation that we wanted to be able to give. For all the floors were done in hard maple, like I said, and we did special stuff for the walls. And that was done by a company in Milwaukee called ProStar Surfaces. We're a really good partner with. And they used all of our wood in there, and it was all custom cut and set on diagonals exactly the way they wanted it. And Eli and his team from the Field Museum, and most of those guys are indigenous people, and they wanted it perfect. So when they say native truths at the Field Museum, that was all them putting that all together, and they had a passion for it. We worked on that project for 3 years before it opened.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredibly impressive. And you also mentioned basketball courts, which I know doesn't relate to the sustainability report, but I read that Menominee Tribal Enterprises provided wood to NCAA and Tokyo Olympics. Is that correct?
Yeah, we got a really good partner in Connor Sports that helped us out during that time, and so they ordered all the wood for the NCAA floors, men's and women's, in 2019, and we also did it in 2008, I think, also. And so those courts were all on Menominee hard maple, which was really, to be able to do that, it was really, really impressive, really fun. And so we really made a big deal about it. Again, we went back to the schools and we got our kids involved, and we did blessings on the wood as we took them out of the forest. We had people that were doing that, and on the actual wood as it headed out to be done, to be milled into lumber into flooring. And it was just, the whole thing was just spectacular. So NCAA Final Four floors, that same company ordered floors for the Tokyo Olympics. And so if it was a basketball court, we were proud to say that it was MTE wood. And really excited about that. And the Milwaukee Bucks, if you're from Wisconsin, the Milwaukee Bucks have all their practice courts, and their 2 courts at the Fiserv Forum are all from our forest as well. It was specified for that. And I know when they did that too, they came up and the floors were blessed. And they got to pick the stands of a maple we were going to take them out of. And then when we take maple for those floors, our maple is probably averaging 18 to 22 inches in diameter, and in the industry average is probably 14 to 16. So really impressive, and we had people from the Bucks up there doing that, and so we did that. And the nice story about that is that when the Bucks won the world title, those of you that were in with that, you know that they were down two games to none and to the Phoenix Suns. And I called Peter Fagan up, who we got to know through the whole process of the building, that we saw each other every week for a couple of years. And I said, Peter, you got the wrong floor out there. Switched floors, switched to that other floor with the big buck head on it. That floor only has one loss. So we switched floors that night. He emailed me the next morning. He said it's done. Well, anybody that watched that series know that they never lost a game after that. Every game was won on that floor. And so it was really impressive. And I said to him, and this article was picked up by USA Today and carried on almost every newspaper in the country, which was fabulous advertising for us. And they said, Peter, how do you feel about the floors now that the Bucks are world champions? He goes, I believe in a blessed floor. That's all I can say. So that was pretty neat. So it's a little bit different. You know, we try and do different things with it and help our customers to be able to not just sell a product. You got to be able to tell the story. The story is everything, especially nowadays, I think. You get a lot of smaller families or broken families, and they're grabbing for something that they can tell is special. So if you're from Wisconsin, it's the Packers or the Bucks. But if you can do something like that and say, hey, our floor came from here too. And if you're watching the Olympics, that's our floor too. And Chris Middleton says to the coach at the Olympics when he gets off the plane after winning the world title, and he gets off the plane and he walks over to the guy and he says, is this floors the same floors that we got in Milwaukee? And they go, yep. He goes, okay, we'll be good then. We'll win the rest. I don't think they lost a game after that either. So pretty cool stuff. Whether you believe it or not, it's cool stuff.
Okay. If it wins, right?
Yeah.
So switching a bit back to sustainability, I was wondering, moving forward for the Menominee Forest and the Menominee Tribal Enterprises, what challenges do you expect in the upcoming years? Specifically maybe with invasive species or things like that. I know that you grow ash trees in the forest, which the emerald ash borer is moving its way up. Are there any challenges that you foresee in the future?
Well, sustainability is everything to us. It's what we started with originally. We'll do that for as long as we have it. We'll never change from that. And what I see that it's working. It's working, and everybody from around the world is coming to see it, and they kind of don't believe it. We had the Pakistanis in here last year, and I'll never forget the guy. He said, yes, I want a floor in my place from this forest, just like this. And now I know how we're going to do it. We make our own. We're going to build our own. And we're going to grow our forests better because we cut them all down. We're going to do it different. I want to be able to do the same thing you did. So he saw that when he was there. So when we do a tour with people that are international that come in, we don't only take them to our mill and watch us cut all the wood and all this stuff, which is really cool, and for guys, they all love that. But going to the forest is a much bigger deal. They walk into the forest and they see a forest that's vibrant and growing, and you step on and you walk through the moss that's on the ground, or all the plants that are on the ground, and people are trying to go around the trilliums that are coming up in spring. Don't step on those things; they're endangered species. There's thousands of them in our forests that are coming up in spring, and so when they see that kind of stuff, they realize maybe this is a different way of doing it. Maybe this is a better way of doing it. I'm not saying everybody around the world is doing it wrong, but I think you should probably look at it because we're not having the forest fire issues that others are having. Not to say that we aren't going to ever have it. We could. And some of the biggest forest fires in time were the Peshtigo fire that ran right north of us. Didn't burn ours down. Why did that happen? How is that possible? That thing took everything in its path all the way across the whole state. And when you cross the Peshtigo River, we went to the Peshtigo Museum, my wife and I, and they said people were jumping in the water to get away from the fire. But when the fire came, the water started to boil. Can you imagine that? How hot it must have been. That ran through us. That tree that they cut down for the Field Museum, when it hits that mark on there, those are real dark scar marks on the tree. 3 years. And then the tree took off and was growing like crazy because a lot of stuff around it maybe got burned, but the big stuff didn't, and it kept going. So a lot of that stuff is still there. We have some really huge white pine trees on the edge of the Wolf River that are just giant. They're in that watershed, and we won't touch them because they really clean up the water. Incredible cleansing mechanism that Mother Nature has put together for us there. And we don't have those there. There's probably some there that are 230, 240 years old. You know, and when they get really big, well, then eventually tornadoes and stuff are going to knock them down. People would like to have them be really big, but that's not possible.
Yeah, I think I read on your on the site that you don't have trails or pathways throughout the forest. Does that help, do you think, with just keeping everything alive and lush?
Well, we have roads through these different quadrants, so we can get in and we can get logs and stuff out of the woods. So we do have roads. Do we have forests and stuff like that where people like to go on hikes? No. You probably better have a really good GPS, or you better take a native with you where you can walk it and know where you're going, because you're going to be walking for a long time. In some of those areas, even when we go now, I'm like, how do you know where you're at? It could be weeks before we come out the other side.
Wow.
It's really incredible, and lots of wildlife and stuff like that. You did ask me about the emerald ash borer, and it's knocking on our doorstep now. It's right there. It's all around us. But we prepared for it as it was coming, and so we cut down a perimeter around the reservation of ash, so it'll be harder for them to get in. But I think they're going to get in anyway. We probably can't stop it, but we've certainly slowed it down already compared to everybody else, and hopefully keep it at bay. We've got a lot of customers around the world. When you start talking exports, where that means a big deal to them, and because they use a lot of ash trees, and their ashes are used for furniture products. It's used for the frames on your couches and stuff like that, because it's very hard. It's got a lot of flexibility in it, and they use it overseas a lot. I know a good percentage of the stuff that we have gets shipped to Vietnam, built into furniture, and brought back over here. So I don't know how that all works out, but it works out. But that's what we're doing with the ash. We're going to try and get as much of that out of there and save it as fast as we can coming up. I know Ron Wackow and his foresters are planning that already now. We've got to get it out of there, because here's the deal. Everybody knows that already. Once that tree dies, that ash tree is standing there, it only takes 3 to 5 years, and it's going to fall over. It's now dangerous. And people see it in their own yard. All of a sudden, just get a little wind out there. It doesn't have to be a lot, and this tree has reached the point where it's going to fall down, and it just falls on the house. Or falls in their backyard. No, hopefully the kids aren't there and stuff like that. So, and we want to be able to use it. So all of our ashes, no emerald ash borer in it. You don't have the lines in it and stuff like that once you get the borer. So that's a pretty neat deal. So yeah, we're watching invasive species all the time. They have a lot of beach scale up in Upper Peninsula, and has really hurt that whole population quite a bit. We don't have it yet. I hope we never have it, but they have it up there. So we're watching things like that are happening all the time. Everybody knows about Dutch elm disease back when we were kids, and what happened to that. There's no elm trees left anymore. We used to have a lot, and that got eradicated in a hurry. And there's stuff in other species that is happening already. It's a constant process. It kind of happens and it dies off. Some of it's brought in from overseas, some of it's not. And some of it's our own fault. So some of it is how you manage your forest. So the interesting thing about a forest, if you want a really good forest, you don't look up at the trees and say, this forest is really healthy. I would do that. But my foresters all go, look at this. Look at the ground cover here. Look at all the trilliums. Look at the moss here. Look at all that. It's just a beautiful floor. There's no kindling wood for a forest fire to get going. There's not a lot of stuff left behind, because a blessing for us is we get to sell all of our bark is used. Thank you, Wisconsin Paper Council. Some of our great customers are using bark and some of that stuff in ships besides the pulpwood before using logs. They're buying all that and we're making paper out of it. And they're buying it from a customer like us that's 100% FSC certified. So what does that mean? FSC certified means that the forest this is a Forest Stewardship Council worldwide, and it's run out of Bonn, Germany, is the headquarters. And they told us just recently in a meeting that all Europe is going to require FSC certification on all wood used in the next year. That's huge. That's huge. And so internationally, when you look at that, they said, well, where could you get that? The guy goes, well, why don't you go to the USA and go to Wisconsin? You can check the Menominee Forest out. You can start there because they've got it. And so I think you're going to see more of that, more 100% forests, and they're going to manage them better. You may have to pay a little more for some of the wood fiber than they used to do, but it's going to be worth it. We can't afford to have the fires and stuff that we're having, warming up the climate like crazy, and it'll make a big difference.
It sounds like you're being incredibly proactive and just achieving so many sustainability efforts that you're changing perspectives all around the world on how a forest should be managed. So I do want to ask, what are some projects or upcoming things in the next years that you're excited to be working on?
Well, the first big thing we have coming up very soon is Fred Pierce, who wrote the book A Trillion Trees from London, England, is coming with a team from Europe, and they're going to do filming. And they're going to do filming of the forest that they can give out through the Export Council, and everybody can see it and they can get ideas from it, and just maybe have a whole different way of looking at it. Like I told you the story of the guy from Pakistan. I had no idea that this was like this. He said, we want this, we need this where we are. And so maybe that'll help in that respect, and help them to understand what a real sustainable forest looks like. So that's a big, exciting project. And we're getting all our kids involved in that. They're going to be doing coloring contests and essays, and they'll get prizes from the Green Bay Packers during that whole thing. They're going to come and give out prizes for the best ones. So we're pretty excited about that. He's a real icon in the world as far as sustainable forestry. And in his book, he writes about a forest. You can go out and try and plant all the trees that you want. And a lot of people think it's all about planting trees. And we plant trees. When we get areas where they're not growing as well, we'll plant trees. And last year we planted 250,000 trees just in our area alone. And we try and get schools from around us to join us and have fun in it, and we do it together. So we do that, but we rely on the forest to do most of it. And so he's saying, take a look at what the forest can do for you. Get the forest floor prepped before those seeds open up, so that when they drop their seeds, everything will be ready, and they'll drop, and that ground will be there in their first rain. The water will nourish the soil, and they'll take off. If you ever see a big stand of white pine trees, and they drop their seeds and go in there about 6 months later, it's like walking on astroturf. It's like a carpet. You could lay there and you could take a nap on it. It's amazing. And there's thousands and thousands of trees that are starting to come up, just like the big ones that we have. We sell a lot of lumber and stuff worldwide, and but we also sell a lot of pulp and chips, and they help us to keep our forests really clean. And so thank you to the Wisconsin Paper Council, because there's some great partners that we have that allow us to be able to do that are part of our story. And we had the guys from Rapids River and Shawano up not very long ago, and he kind of said to me, he said, well, Nels, where do we go from here? I said, I really don't know. But at least we're starting a dialogue as to what can we do. And one thing I've learned when I'm working with the college kids especially, tell them what we're up against, and they're going to come up with something. And so maybe we just continue to talk with one another out of the industry too, and say, how can we make this better? How can we help tell your story too? So we're sharing ideas together that are going to work for everybody. And I think that's what's really important here. So I just wanted to include that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for saying that. That's definitely a message that Wisconsin Paper Council wants to spread as well. So
yeah,
thank you.
You're doing it already. I mean, stuff that I've been to, and it's just awesome. It's good stuff.
Well, I thank you for being here today and explaining more about Menominee Tribal Enterprises and your sustainability efforts. You can find more information on your website, correct?
There's a lot of stuff on the website. If you go to the actual forestry section, you can pull up a document there that we've drawn up that lays out the next 10 years. very interesting. I think a lot of places and a lot of tribes from around North America grab that and help use it. And they come in, or they'll look at that first before they come in to visit us, which I think it's a good thing to be able to do. So yeah, good
and
stuff.
I will put that website link on the video or podcast description. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to our podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. For more information on the paper industry or the Wisconsin Paper Council, please visit www.wipaper.org. WPC members have access to special events, newsletters, committees, and more.